I'm Kishore Patvardhan, and I work for Banaras Hindu University in the Department of Kriya Sharya. I currently am heading the department, and I have been working for BHU for around 19 years. So, uh, well, that is my introduction, and let me share my screen so that we'll begin the discussion on the topic. And I'm going to talk about the relevance of certain theories of Ayurveda in the current context. And yeah, let me share my screen and let us start. So, yeah, the topic or title that I have given to my talk is testing the relevance of basic theories of Ayurveda. And Tridosha is being taken as an example, right? So, Tridosha as an example. Well, I would like to make a rather unusual disclaimer over here. This talk overrides all my previous talks on the subject. Yeah, this is a bit strange, but yes, because this is going to be the first public talk being aired after I wrote my paper, Confessions of an Ayurveda Professor, where I have retracted most of my views expressed in my previous writings on the subject. And this paper was published in July 2022, so almost more than 1 year, right? And it was published in the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics. So any mismatch between this talk and my previous talks must be viewed from this perspective, and this is the disclaimer with which I'm going to start my talk. So what are we going to discuss in this talk? We will try to reconstruct the Tridosha theory, and we will also try to look at the value of Tridosha theory in today's clinical practice. Then we will take up the question as to what portion of this theory is obsolete and needs to be discarded. And also there will be some general comments on the current system of education. So this is all that we are going to cover in next maybe 1 hour or so. So let us take up the origin of Tridosha theory. Tridosha theory can be traced back to Nyaya Vaisheshika schools of philosophy. Nyaya is primarily a commonsensical logic, and Vaisheshika is a primitive physics, to put it in simple terms. So the starting point of this theory is with Panchamabhuta. So Panchamabhutas are actually 5 primary units which make up the entire observable universe according to these schools of thoughts. So the 5 primary units are Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Up and Prithvi. So Akasha is translated as space, but this is not something related to outer space, right? This is a continuous area or expanse which is free, available or unoccupied or empty. That is the meaning of Akash. Vayu is wind, Agni is fire, Up is water, and Prithvi is earth. I would like to make a comment over here that interpretation or translation of these 5 primary units as proto elements or elements or subatomic particles is problematic and could be quite misleading. So this is something that I would like to add over here. This concept is common sense based and should not be treated as fully evolved physics or chemistry. This is very, very easily understandable, and this is common sense based. So according to this theory, the entire observable universe can be classified into 5 classes. Very simple. So those are things that can be heard, things that can be touched, things that can be seen, things that can be tasted, and things that can be smelled. So Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa and Gandha. So this is how the entire observable universe was classified based on the 5 sensory organs that we have. So these 5 classes were integrated into 5 Mahabhutas, right? So Akasha was integrated in Shabda because sound can travel even in space. Vayu, so space, the term space has to be carefully understood as I explained during my previous slide. So Vayu, the Sparsha, breeze can only be felt through touch. Agni, fire, was integrated with Rupa, that is vision. Things can be viewed only when there is light. Up, that is water. Rasa, that is substances dissolved in water can only be tasted. And Prithvi, that is related to Gandha, right? That was integrated with Gandha. When it rains, for example, the soil smells good. This is the very very commonsensical basis, and this, especially the Prithvi and Gandha, has got transcultural connotation. We often, in our culture, we associate smell with soil, not with flowers or something. Fragrance is always associated with soil, right? Fragrance of soil, or mitti ki khushbu in Hindi, mannina vasane in Kannada, right? Man vasam in Tamil. So this is how we have, this cultural sort of connotation to this Prithvi and smell, and this is very interesting, right? So what we speak can be heard by another. So our voice travels through space. Okay, so my voice can be heard by the person sitting in front of me. That is as simple as that. So ancient scholars possibly did not realize that sound needed some medium to travel, air in this example, and sound did not travel in vacuum, right? So space can only transmit sound but can't be felt through other senses. That is why Akasha was, linked with the Shabda. Now, why is everything Panchbhautik? Why is everything Panchbhautik? Right? So there are things that can be seen as well as touched. For example, a tree or this table. I can touch it and I can also view it. There are things that can be seen, tasted, and smelled. For example, eatables. So hence it was logical to propose that everything is composed of these 5 units, but in different proportions. Hence the saying, everything in this universe is Panchabhautika. So, but of course, the Panchamabhuta theory could not explain health and disease, because there is no difference between this, table and a human body, or between a rock and a human body. So there was a need which was felt for the development of another theory that could explain systematically the various aspects of health and disease. For that purpose, Tridosha theory was evolved. Some basic observations may help us build the background. I'm trying to build the background of Tridosha theory, right? Imagine a plant kept in the dark, in a closed, airtight jar. It dies soon, right? Too cold a climate normally does not support life, right? We know this is, again, all this is commonsensical, right? So an animal, when suffocated, dies. One cannot survive without water and food, right? Similarly, warm on touch is a sign of life. So if I ask you to name 3 essentials, right, without which you cannot survive, possibly, right, any person with common sense will come up with 3 names, right, or entities. Air or wind, right? We need to breathe. Without breathing, we cannot be alive. Second one is sun. We depend on plants for food, and plants cannot survive without sun, because ultimately the sun is the ultimate source of all sorts of energy that we have in our planet. Third is water. We need water to drink and to cook food. So without, right, air, sun, and water, possibly we cannot live. So these are the 3 very essential entities without which life cannot be sustained. So that is how, Soma, Surya, and Anila. this concept was evolved. Right? Soma has got two meanings. One is moon, another one is water. So Visargadana Vikshepaihi, right? We know this, right? Visargadana and Vikshepa. The air, sun, and water, or sometimes it is translated as moon. So they regulate the entire, you know, life on earth. And similarly, in our body, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, they regulate almost all the functions of body. So air or wind, so that is atmosphere, breath, or movement. So this is how, right, interlinking takes place. Sun, light, fire, heat, warmth, energy, nutrition, all this is linked with sun. Water, hydration, nourishment, coolant, all this is again related, right? So Tridosha is a theory that was developed to systematize and integrate the knowledge on health, disease, and therapeutics. So that is how Tridosha was evolved, and that was why the Tridosha theory was required. Again, there was link, right? Integration between Tridosha and Panchamabhuta, right? Wind and Akasha to a lesser extent dominates Vata, fire dominates Pitta, and water dominates Kapha, and of course Earth to a lesser extent, right? So see, this is how the, in Ayurvedic classics you get the explanation of, for example, Agni Reva Sharire Pittantargataha, right? Or Vayu Reva, Bahya Vayu and Abhyantara Vayu. So such explanations you get, right? So wind, fire, and water, just like the outer world is governed by these three entities. Similarly, the inner, body is also governed by these three entities, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. That is how the theory is, very, very commonsensical. Again, this was then expanded to Tridosha. I mean, physiology. This was then expanded to physiology. So Vata, just as wind, controlled all activities like movements, because Vata is related with, movements, right? Vata can be, can move. So Pitta, just as sun and fire, generated heat, imparted color, and brought about digestion. So that is the function of Pitta. Kapha, just as water, provided nourishment and acted as coolant. That is how the, functional, uh, I want to stop here. I'll restart once again.
Yeah, you can start again. It's easy. You just keep on going. When you make a mistake, just continue from there.
Sure.
Easy. Okay, thank you.
So this is how the physiology was integrated into the concept of Tridosha. Right? Then comes the Guna principle again, attributes. Again, all these are interlinked. This is the beauty of our ancient scriptures, right? All theories were interlinked. So another important doctrine. This was also adopted from Nyaya Vaisheshika systems of knowledge. So each dosha has specific attributes. For example, Tatra Ruksho Lakhushitaha, Khara Sukshmashchalonila, and so on. All medicinal plants and food grains too possess similar attributes. And this has some application. It is proposed that the attributes of food that are common to a dosha cause an increase in the activity of that corresponding dosha. For example, the consumption of oily, sweet, heavy foods, right, leads to an increase in kapha, and thus it will lead to obesity. So this was how it was clearly, logically built. The theory was constructed. Kapha and vata share mostly opposite attributes, except for shita. So hence, anything that is similar in the attributes of vata would lead to a decrease in kapha. Hence, physical exercise, intake of dry, light, rough food, lack of sleep, all act as a treatment of for obesity, right? Physical activity, intake of dry, light, rough food, non-nutritious food, basically, right? And lack of sedentary lifestyle. So all that will act as anti-kapha, or treatment for obesity. So thus this theory is commonsensical and based on simple observations. Now coming to the utility of this theory. This theory is of utility, definitely, right? It is of definite utility. So why? So Tridosha and their associated attributes are used to identify and classify clinical symptoms. For instance, pain is due to Vata, right? Edema is due to Kapha, burning is due to Pitta. So see, this is very helpful, right? It enables quick clinical decision making, right? What treatment should be given in this condition? If it is due to Vata, then Vatahara. If it is due to Pitta, Pittahara. So I mean, this helps in clinical decision making. Population can be classified into different groups based on Tridosha theory. That is in terms of Prakriti, Vata Prakriti, Pitta Prakriti, Kapha Prakriti, and so on. And maybe this may be of some predictive value. Of course, most of the studies pertaining to Prakriti are still preliminary. Right? We cannot deduce much of conclusions based on what research is going on. Of course, some genetic links have been identified. All that is interesting, right? But as of now, nothing sort of conclusive has come up as of now, right? So specific medicinal plants are helpful in treating diseases associated with a particular dosha. For example, Nirgundi for Vata, Ushira for Pitta, Gugulu for Kapha, and so on. So again, it enables the physician to choose the right drug, and this is helpful, right? Now, coming to the deficiencies of Tridosha theory. This logic of Tridosha is grossly insufficient to diagnose complex diseases. For example, excessive Pitta produces an excess of heat in the body because production of heat is the function of Pitta. Santapa, right? Tapa Santape Pittam, right? Santapa or production of heat is a function of Pitta. But fever can manifest because of hundreds of reasons. Maybe infections, maybe hyperthyroidism, cancers, autoimmune diseases, and etc. And so on. There are so many reasons for fever to be produced. And fever is just a symptom in these different conditions. And Tridosha theory is insufficient to explain this complexity. This is useful to explain, general understanding of a disease, but complex diseases and the minute details of diseases cannot be explained by Tridosha theory. Similarly, pathophysiology. There is no description of the role of pancreas, for example, in metabolism in Ayurvedic textbooks. All conditions manifesting with polyuria are included in Prameya. It was logical, right? For them, it was logical, quite logical. Hence, the pathophysiology of diabetes is incomplete, right? Without understanding the physiology and pathology of metabolism and the role of pancreas, the understanding of Prameha becomes incomplete. Similarly, no endocrine disease has a correct pathological basis in Ayurveda. Right? Many scholars they argue that Ashtamahagada is indicative of endocrine disorders. It may be, it could be, but it is oversimplification of such clinical manifestations. There could be several other conditions where similar clinical manifestations can be observed. It is not only limited to endocrine disorders. So yes, whether Tridoshas are substances or theoretical entities. This is a very common question that bothers Ayurvedic scholars. Since Tridoshas were not directly perceivable, there were different opinions as to whether they were substances or merely theoretical constructs. Some scholars argued that Tridoshas could be inferred only through their functions and cannot be perceived through sense organs. Hence, they gave Tridosha a theoretical identity. But classics describe different tubular structures like Vata Vahasira, Pitta Vahasira, Kapha Vahasira, and so on, along with their colors that carried Vata, Pitta, and Kapha in the body. Now, most of the modern scholars of Ayurveda, they regard Vata, Pitta, Kapha as functional entities or theoretical entities and not as structural entities. But I have a problem with these scholars because they fail to provide a logical justification based on which they disregard the structural existence of Tridosha. So these are my questions to these scholars, right? Do they disregard it just because that doesn't suit their story? Is it for the sake of convenience? Why accept something and disregard something else from the same classical textbook? What discretion do you exercise? So these are my questions to these scholars who argue that Tridoshas are only functional and theoretical entities and they cannot be, perceived and they're not substances. So again, another deficiency is in complex pathophysiology, right? Obesity-induced osteoarthritis, for example, of knee joint, right? Obesity-induced osteoarthritis of knee joint presents with the vata symptoms like pain, right? But the treatment should be aimed at reducing weight, which should be reducing kapha. So scholars try to invoke several conjectures like avarana, right, and other such explanations, which are ad hoc conjectures that are brought in whenever this logic fails, whenever the tridosha logic fails, scholars quickly they bring up some ad hoc conjectures and they try to rescue the theory. Avarana is purely an imaginative explanation. Similarly, another example could be taken of anemia of renal origin, right? Because the ancient scholars they did not know the role of kidney in erythropoiesis. Hence, by using the Ayurvedic logic, the role of kidneys or in anemia cannot be ascertained. So it cannot be diagnosed through Ayurvedic logic. Similarly, newer disease entities like hypertension, newer infectious diseases, maybe for example COVID, right? Hyperlipidemia, all these entities cannot be accurately diagnosed based on Ayurvedic principles because they are diagnosed often before they manifest as clinical symptoms. For example, hypertension. In Ayurveda, if you look at hypertension, you may get some complications, maybe pakshaghata or maybe timira, maybe mutraghata. In such cases, the complications of hypertension could be visible, could have been recorded. But as such, the entity which we regard as hypertension today has not been mentioned. And quite obviously, right? Because they did not have tools that we have today. So this is something that is very important. We should realize that there is limitation. Tridosha theory has got its own limitation. So caution to be exercised. Vata Pitta Kapha represent an oversimplified theory which can lead to errors if employed without applying current scientific knowledge pertaining to physiology and pathology. This is very important. We need to tell our students that this is an oversimplification and this may lead to errors. Hence, while the theory could be of use in clinical diagnosis and in planning treatment, it fails to explain pathology and may lead to errors. This is something very important and we need to discuss about this openly. Hence, projecting Tridosha theory as a complete, super sophisticated, scientifically proven theory is problematic. It is useful only as a heuristic model. As a heuristic model, yes, it is helpful. But to understand the depth of the disease, no, it is insufficient. Now, contextualizing Tridosha theory in health sciences, right? Let me bring up certain examples. Right? Ayurveda literature got documented somewhere between 4th century BC and 2nd century CE in the form of Samhitas. And some take this timeline back to 8th century BC. So whatever it is. So this is the rough timeline when the Ayurveda literature got documented. But many theories of Ayurveda might have been in existence even before this as a part of oral tradition. Right? So this is something very important and interesting. It is interesting to note that theories like Tridosha are common to many ancient medical traditions. It is not only unique for Ayurveda. Blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm were the four humors in ancient Greek medicine. And those who are interested might like to go through a Wikipedia article on humorism. Even in traditional Chinese medicine, a somewhat similar theory existed. There is an article, which the interested readers can go through. The concept of wind in traditional Chinese medicine. So this Tridosha concept or similar concept was common to many traditional systems of medicine. This is very interesting. And if you read what is Indo-European language, right? Sir William Jones has proposed Indo-European language family. And he has noted similarities among Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, Germanic, and Celtic languages. Those who are interested can go through Indo-European languages, a page on Wikipedia. And so there are two possibilities, or both simultaneously are possible. So continuous exchanges between different cultures, between Greek and Indian scholars, right? This might have been one of the reasons why these theories are common or similar. Or another possibility is that a distant common origin in the form of Proto-Indo-European language. This is also possible, right? This is being, proposed as a remote uh, language, right, in the remote past, which was spoken, and this gave birth to several other languages. And it makes sense when you look at the similarities between different words. Many words are common to these languages, and several words sound very similar also. Ignis, Agni; Pneuma, Prana; Phlegm, Shleshma; Vayu, Ailus. They are all, semantically they are related words. Some of them have common etymology, and this is very, very interesting. Now coming to another important aspect, that is association versus causation. As you can make out in the picture, of course, this has been downloaded from some, somewhere from the internet. You can see that the cat is sitting on the roof, and the roof is broken. So now, if you say that roof got broke down because of the jumping of the cat, this is called causation, right? Association is that the roof was already broken and cat occupied a, unique particular position, so that it looks as though that is causing the breakdown of the roof. So this is, basic understanding or basic distinction between association and causation. And often we mistake causation for association. For instance, if I ask, what is this in this example, right, in this photograph, uh, many might say that it is just an association, but I don't know. I might say that no, this is just a, model made up of paper. Then it could be causation also. The roof is just a paper model, and right, the cat has jumped over the roof, and the roof was literally broken down because of the cat. I mean, there are two possibilities. We do not know, right? So this association and causation is not very easy to identify. This is what I'm trying to convey. Sometimes it could be misleading. Even many of current researchers also, they mistake association for causation. So it is, understandable that many of Ayurvedic ancient scholars might have mistook association for causation. I'll give some examples. Imagine a situation: a fit person, while peacefully reading a book, suddenly develops involuntary movements all over the body and develops forgetfulness. Right? Similarly, a physically healthy individual starts seeing things that do not exist, or starts hearing sounds that do not exist. All this can happen suddenly, all of a sudden, right? In certain, kinds of epilepsies, or certain kinds of uh, psychosis, all this can happen. So, if such a thing happened, right, imagine we are in 4th century BC. How would Charaka or Sushruta have interpreted this? Because the existing theories or existing observations were insufficient to explain this. They did not know what goes wrong in the brain when there is epileptic attack, right? So it was common, or commonsensical for them to imagine that some unseen supernatural force could be leading to the manifestation of these symptoms, or maybe our gods or demons are behind this. Can we recommend sacrifices, or wearing precious stones or offerings, etc., as a treatment? So these could be the line of thoughts. So some of these illnesses could be self-limiting, others could be episodic and brief. Hence, there are chances that one could infer causation. For example, you performed sacrifice, and the person became symptom free. Then you could infer that sacrifice cured epilepsy. So just because one is happening before the another, another happening event. So one event is happening before the another event. For example, sacrifice is happening before the relief, symptomatic relief. Just because of this temporal relationship, you cannot infer causation. This could be simply association. Right? Ayurveda theorists might have mistaken association for causation. So it is quite understandable. This is the reason why it is difficult to build a continuous, coherent story out of the existing Ayurveda textbooks. Rational and scientific descriptions are interspersed between faith-based and speculative arguments. There are so many speculative arguments, faith-based arguments, and at the same time there are some highly scientific descriptions, very rational descriptions. So these two are mixed. Right? What we need to do, we need to identify them. This is what I'm going to talk in my next part of this talk, right? So for example, see, this is one example from one of the studies, right? So one observes that people aged 95 years and above drink plenty of coffee. So drinking coffee is associated with longevity, right? But it does not mean that drinking coffee leads to longevity. There is difference. So first one is association, second one is causation. It could be simply indicative of affordability or good socio-economic status, giving easy access to healthcare. That could be the actual reason. But we are inferring that no, drinking coffee is leading to longevity. So this is the example where we mistake association for causation. This is quite common. This mistake or this confusion could be quite common. Now, coming to Ayurvedic way of understanding knowledge, right, or acquiring knowledge. So, Pratyaksha, Anumana, Aptopadesha, and Yukti. These were the four important means of acquiring knowledge as per Ayurvedic classics. Pratyaksha is direct observation. Anumana is inference. Aptopadesha is authoritative knowledge. And Yukti is inference based on multiple observations of association. And they are quite logical. All these are very highly logical, of course. But none of these methods takes controlled experimentation as a tool to derive knowledge, because controlled experimentation is a new thing. It was not there in any of those ancient cultures. This controlled experimentation was not there. But causation can be ascertained only with controlled experimentation. Right? Cause effect relationship can be ascertained only with controlled experimentation. But is there no reference to any sort of experimentation in Ayurveda? No, it is wrong to say that. Right? For example, Upashaya and Anupashaya were primitive experiments. We should accept this. They did not have controls. That is the only problem. Right? So if it was today, what we would have done is, yes, one person suffering from epilepsy, right? Another, maybe 10% suffering from epilepsy, ask them to offer sacrifices. 10 more persons in the control arm, do not offer any sacrifices. And then see what happens in the two groups. How do they respond, or how do they, what are the consequences? So whenever there is a control group, we will be easily able to arrive at a decisive understanding. So in Ayurveda, possibly the trial and error method was possibly the most used experimental method. Of course, it is an important method. Even today, we do trial and error. In our daily life, we do trial and error methods, right? However, and again, we need to remember that history of human experimentation is very dark and inhuman. Often it was unethical. Those interested might like to go through the Nazi human experimentation page on Wikipedia. So there were, live living individuals thrown into water of 100 degrees centigrade, 200 degrees centigrade, and so on, just to see, right? After what duration the person dies. So see, human experimentation was very inhuman. The history of human experimentation is very inhuman, and we need to remember that. And that is why in Ayurveda we did not have these sorts of experimentation and controlled experimentation. because possibly it was unethical to have those experiments. So this is an example, right? So an individual is being he's losing consciousness during depressurization experiment as a part of Nazi experimentation. Right? So this is see how inhuman is this experimentation. Now, when do we go wrong? Instead of critically examining the available literature and subjecting it to evaluation. Can I have a break? Yeah. Let me restart. So instead of critically examining the available literature and subjecting it to evaluation, arguing that whatever is written in ancient textbooks is true and unquestionable, makes Ayurveda a pseudoscience. This is where we go wrong. All modern discoveries are already documented in Ayurveda, is another viewpoint that makes Ayurveda pseudoscience. For example, arguing that Pishacha, Rakshasa, etc. are nothing but different bacteria and viri. Right? When you make such statements, we are making Ayurveda a pseudoscience. Whereas actually Ayurveda inherently is not a pseudoscience. See, descriptions recorded based on observations are important. See, this is how we need to understand what is important and what is not so important in Ayurveda. So the descriptions recorded based on observations are very important. Maybe symptoms, maybe treatment plan, maybe medicinal plants, maybe preventive aspects, dietetics. All these fall under observation-based documentation. Ayurveda textbooks do not contain good anatomy, physiology, and pathology. We need to accept it. The physiological role of many organs such as kidneys, pancreas, ovaries were not known to the ancient scholars. And many physiological descriptions are incorrect or incomplete. For example, formation of blood or formation of urine or formation of semen, right? They are primitive and sometimes incomplete. Imaginative theories such as Dhatu Poshana are of minimal value. Samprapti of most of the diseases is either imaginative or quasi-observational. Right? Kapha stops the movement of Vata, or Vata takes Pitta to different parts of the body to produce disease, etc., etc. Right? So this is how the Samprapti of many diseases is documented, and it is not based on biological facts. This is based on theoretical, imagination coupled with some observations. Of course, this Sthana Samshaya is observation based. But before that, most of these are speculative ideas. We need to distinguish between the two. Some scientists show interest in Ayurveda because they find striking similarities. For example, this is a recent paper that I got to read, which is authored by endocrinologists. Right? They are writing on Ayurveda and endocrinology, common ground, common goals. They write, for example, ojas, tejas, prana, and hormones, right? Tejas and pheromones. So all this sort of writing, right, is to be viewed at by high level of skepticism, because we need to be cautious. Comparable or similar theories are simply commonsensical. They should not be confused for advanced theories. Exotic or interesting doesn't mean scientifically advanced. Such comparisons often render sophisticated details into vague concepts. This is something very important. For example, molecular mechanisms, if they are converted into Vata Pitta Kapha, you are converting what is sophisticated into vague. Motility of sperms is controlled by Vata, for example. We know that ancient Ayurvedic scholars, they did not have access to microscope. They did not know about sperms and their motility. Why do we bring in Vata here? Right? Enzymatic activity is controlled by Pitta. Right? Though this could be true, right? But for example, digestion is the function of Pitta. But that doesn't mean that ancient scholars knew about the enzymes. Enzymes are molecular level of understanding. Hormones are represented by Dhatwagni. So all such sorts of propositions that we make are to be avoided. this doesn't serve any purpose. This is what I have understood during last 20 years or so of my experience as a teacher. I too have done all this in the past. If you go through my past writings, you will get that all this comparison, interpretation, everything I have done. And then I realized that what I was doing was pseudoscience. And that is why I had to write, the article titled Confessions of an Ayurveda Professor. So coming to the current system. So current education system is faulty because it doesn't encourage questioning and promotes blind faith in authority. Teaching exercises intended at reinforcing the belief that our ancient textbooks contain only truth and nothing else. And this needs unbiased but considered approach. Right? While reading Samhitas, while approaching Samhitas, we need an unbiased but at the same time considered approach, because this knowledge is ours and we need to preserve it and use it. But how? Right? So, what is the need of the hour? Develop a method to identify observations, practices, theories, imaginations, and speculations clearly. Separate useful observations and practices from hypothetical, speculative, theoretical description. Subject what is useful to an evidence-based appraisal so that the best becomes available for use. But of course, exercise caution while labeling something as unscientific. Add advanced physiology, anatomy, biochemistry in the curricula. That makes our students, our graduates, equipped, right, to grasp the actual biological basis of a disease. Biological basis of health and disease should form the foundation, not the theories. So this is a result. These are some results I'm sharing with you. These are yet unpublished, right? So in our study, we found that the interventions prescribed by physicians vary widely in a single patient scenario. This goes to the extent of one physician prescribing certain intervention and the other saying that the same intervention is contraindicated. And when we asked to explain the Ayurvedic, physiology-based explanations, right, Ayurveda-based pathophysiological explanations to justify their interventions, these explanations also varied widely for a single patient. Even regarding the identity, there is often no consensus. This is what we have observed. Physicians often use biomedical based diagnosis as well as treatment plan, but mostly do not acknowledge the same. And physicians mostly neglect the factors like Prakriti, Desha, Kala, Koshta, Sara, etc. while prescribing the treatment. And this, in fact, contradicts the usual argument of individualization in Ayurveda practice. So, these are some observations which are very interesting and important. So, there is a science versus pseudoscience debate going on since last few years, and we need to understand this very clearly, right? What is named or titled pseudoscience and what is science? We need to understand the distinction between the two. Of course, it is a spectrum, right? But we need to understand what is pseudoscience. And when we make Ayurveda pseudoscience, at least we should not be making Ayurveda pseudoscience. This is what we can avoid. So Ayurveda is not a pseudoscience inherently, as I told earlier, right? Inherently, it is not a pseudoscience. It is as much science as is Ptolemy's theory of universe. For example, the geocentric theory is not pseudoscience. It is not pseudoscience. Geocentric theory was discarded as soon as new evidence came up. That is how science evolves. Similarly, many Ayurveda theories are pre-scientific. Humoral theory, for example, is insufficient in understanding health and disease, right? Especially the details, right? So this theory existed even in other ancient civilizations, and this is not pseudoscience, right? Tridosh theory is not pseudoscience. Let us be very clear. But when the practitioners and teachers of Ayurveda start defending these theories and start projecting them as though they are super sophisticated, and sometimes they even go to the extent of arguing that these are yet to be proven by modern science. Now they make Ayurveda pseudoscience. Right? Hope I'm clear. Now, how to make course correction? So how much of irrelevant and impractical content is taught in Ayush curricula is a matter of serious concern, and this needs serious deliberation. For example, in Ayurveda Kriya Sharir or maybe Vikriti Vignan, hundreds of hours of teaching, right, is dedicated to teach these theories. And many of these theories could be simply, may not be practically applicable. So the assumption that Ayurveda is unquestionable makes Ayurveda non-falsifiable and hence a non-science. So such a deliberation does not happen when only Ayurveda experts sit together for carrying out curricular reforms. But it may happen, of course, I'm skeptical when I say this, it may happen when there is involvement of experts from multiple disciplines. So this is one important argument that I'm going to make here. Did the theories lose importance as Ayurveda evolved? It is often argued that evolution of textbooks of Ayurveda stopped long ago, and Vagbhata was the last to come up with his own complete treatise. This is often argued that after 6th century AD or so, right, there was no new Samhita. But to me, this argument looks unfounded. Many books were authored by different Vaidyas. For example, Yoga Ratnakara, Chakradatta, Bhashya Ratnavali, right, a few of them. They mostly describe different formulations and therapies for different diseases. This is their uniqueness. And clinical presentation of different diseases also is documented. So presentation of different diseases and their diagnosis and treatment and different formulations. And emphasis was also placed on pharmacy. See, all this is, pratyakshagamya, observation based, right? And as the newer textbooks were written, the theory portion was slowly sidelined. Importance given to the theories in these books is minimal. We need to look at this as a part of evolution. Slowly, the theories and speculative descriptions were sidelined, and only direct observations received more attention and were retained. That is how any science advances, for that matter. So, with this, I would like to conclude my talk. I thank Dr. G.L. Krishna for his feedback on various views expressed in this talk. And he also happens to be the one who made me introspect and revise my ideas on the subject. So, yeah, these are some of the important references that I have referred. Yeah, this is my last slide. I would like to quote Richard Feynman, where he says, "We are trying to prove ourselves wrong as quickly as possible, because only in that way we can find progress." I think we need to adopt this on Ayurveda scenario also. And with this, I conclude my talk. Thank you. Thanks a lot.